right, welcome into the Hoist the Colors podcast. We are live and got about a 1 minute, 2 minute late start. We were discussing some good stuff off the air pre-show. I'm Stephen Igo, host of Hoist the Colors. I'm joined by Macy O'Donnell, who has been with us all preseason long, previewing every position. We've made it to the end. We're going to kind of jam all the defensive backs into one here, Macy O. So we got a lot to talk about, but we finally made it to the end. Preseason camp's underway. We can get into some of that if anybody has any questions. But man, we're finally here and ready to talk some DBs. You ready for the season yet? You ready to get going?
Yeah, I'm ready. I saw the Jets playing the other night, and I didn't even realize they had a game going on. So I was like, "Dang, really? Football season is here already." So I'm just ready to go see some college football now.
Yeah, the Hall of Fame game, Jets Browns, I believe it was. That marks. They say every year, like once the Hall of Fame game comes and goes, that's like you have football on every week from now until February, either
Yeah.
NFL or college. So that's a good feeling to have for sure. We are live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook, live on Twitter. If you got a question, a comment, anything, we'll discuss it. Of course, we're sticking with defensive back talk, me and Maceo today for the most part. But if you want to branch out, ask anything about how the preseason is going, feel free to drop it in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. That's where we'll get the comments shown up on the streaming software we're using. We'll answer those, and we got a lot to talk about from a defensive back perspective. So we'll get into that. We got a question here. You may know this, Maceo, from Christian. He says, speaking of the Jets, is DJ Ford playing anywhere these days? Are you keeping in contact with DJ at all?
I haven't talked to DJ in a little bit, but I know he did get a mini camp invite with them, and I don't think he's still with them now. But DJ is one of those people. He came from Carolina, so he has some a good brain on the top of his head. So he's probably out there doing something smart and something he's supposed to do. But he was a great safety for us at ECU for I think the year he played with us, and he was one of the hardest guys to go against, honestly.
Yeah, he was a big dude. He's one of the few UNC transfers that showed up in great
Yeah.
condition, and a lot of those guys have either had to add weight or lose some after showing up to ECU. And we've got several UNC transfers to talk about in this preview because there are a couple in the defensive backfield. So how we're going to do this is we got the two corner positions, obviously, and the way ECU does it is kind of a boundary corner, which plays to the boundary side of the field, and then you got the field cornerback, which plays to the wide side of the field, where there's more room. That's typically how they do it. Of course, guys can play both sides, but they like to have personnel kind of split up that way. And then you got the safety, which is similar circumstance, boundary safety, field safety as well, where they play more to the side of the field. Usually you want your faster safety playing the field, your better run stopper playing the boundary, really at corner and safety. We talked about the Sam linebackers last week in our linebacker preview. So, some of those guys can go back and forth between safety and linebacker, but we kind of already discussed them, like Rod Dilworth, Kingston McKintry, some of those guys. All right, Macy, let's talk corners first. Again, keep dropping your questions. We'll get to those as we go along. But this is basically a brand new room outside of the fact you do have, I think, two returners, which is kind of crazy, but neither of them really played last year. Siobhan Rebel is second year, former JUCO transfer. He is back, and Isaiah Brown Murray was a true freshman last year. He redshirted, but did get a little bit of action, traveled with the team. So those are your only returners. Gone is Malik Fleming, a pre-Washington who was a transfer last year. He's gone. Demel Hickman, Jawan Powell. Trying to think, Fletcher Marshall's gone. Jamani Wilson's gone. So, it's a brand new room. You got a new corners coach. Jules Montanard takes over for Steve Ellis. So, before we get into the personnel here, just what are your expectations for this group with so many new faces and, some guys returning?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of transfers coming in this year, and we also have IBM and Siobhan who really stand out for me. Who's coming back? Siobhan, like you said, is a JUCO guy, a young guy, has a lot of length and speed. So even he did a little bit of scout team last year, and he was very tough to go against for inside and outside receivers. So I think a lot of the guys from last year talk very highly of him and think he'll have a big impact on the team. And IBM, one of those young guys who's very fundamental. Reminds you of kind of a Jaquan McMillan when he was a freshman, a guy who was really patient, did what he was supposed to do, was always kind of in the right spots. But last year we did have a lot of guys who had a lot of playing time, a lot of old heads like Jawan Powell, Demel Hickman, Malik Fleming, and a lot of those guys moved on to other places. But I think those two guys are the ones who stand out for me this year. But I definitely think there's some other transfer guys who have had a little bit of playing time and some experience that can help the group also.
Yeah, I won't forget last year. Like I remember talking to people around the program, and they were saying, I know these guys aren't playing. Speaking of Siobhan and IBM, but that they were basically they felt long term they were just as good or had as much upside, I should say, as kind of
Yeah,
the older guys. And I don't know, it's got to be tough for coaches because you got your loyalty to like Malik Fleming. You're not going to take out Malik because he had been a 3-year starter. He'd been an all
right.
conference guy. Jawan Powell had switched positions a bunch, had done a lot for the program. So if you could go back and do it, maybe you play Siobhan and IBM more. And I think both of them are going to play a lot this year. I guess just the inexperience factor at corner maybe worries you some, Maceo, with those two
Yeah,
guys. But I think the good news is, like, I look at Siobhan, and I haven't seen a corner physically at ECU that's 6'2", 180, runs a 4.4. I mean, he is long
yeah.
and he's fast. Like, he looks like an NFL corner, and I'm not trying to put him that much pressure on him. But if he kind of lives up to his potential, to me, he could be as good as any corner ECU's had in a while. Just, do you feel like the upside is there, even though maybe the experience is not?
Yeah, definitely. The only two concerns for me about Siobhan is that he's a little bit undersized as far as weight. He definitely has that height and length, and for sure he has the speed and athleticism to keep up with anybody. But just that inexperience and a little bit of the weight factor when you're playing, and some big guys, especially week one, those receivers are probably going to be his size, but maybe 20 or 30 pounds heavier than him. So that can be hard to guard at sometimes. But I think this past year specifically, we were trying to win a bowl game for the first time in 8 or 9 years. So a lot of times you don't want to, even though you want to give them experience, you want to roll with your older guys who've kind of been in the fire and those who trust to get the job done.
All right, so field corner right now, Isaiah Brown Murray is working there, and he worked there last year a lot with some of the guys who we talked about previously. Also in that mix, as I'm out at preseason camp, you've got the freshman Antoine Jackson, who was a 4-star corner. You've also got Tymir Brown, the UNC transfer. Those are kind of the other real standouts I'm hearing. You've got some other freshmen as well, which we'll mention later on. But Tymir Brown's a guy who has made a big leap from the spring to now. I think kind of struggled at first adapting to the program, makes some big strides over the summer. I think he's in a spot where he's going to play. And then Antoine Jackson, young kid, he's 17 years old. He's a year younger than the rest of his class because he reclassified up a year. But I've just heard and I've seen from a coverage standpoint, he's long, he's 6'1", he runs really well, he can jump. Again, weight-wise, he's undersized, but I think he can get by just off covering for now. I expect those guys to play. Have you heard anything, Maceo, from your sources on Tymir or Antoine, just those young guys?
Not too much about those guys. They always speak very well about the younger guys who are coming in, and I think they have a good group that can kind of show them the ropes and teach them. But even him, and some of the transfer guys, is a new corners coach, and chances are they might not have been recruited by him. So it's a new coach, so they're kind of getting used to the coach and the offense. I mean, the defense as well. So I think anyone can really step up into those positions, but you just kind of see who the coaches feel comfortable with.
The other side, the other transfers we haven't touched on at cornerback yet are Jonathan Jones from Campbell and also Rance Connor from Louisville. So Jonathan Jones played a ton of football at Campbell. He's a bigger guy, 6 foot, 195, kind of fits that boundary mold. Kind of a bigger corner who's going to help you more in the running game. And also Rance Connor, who is a 3-star recruit out of Florida a couple of recruiting classes ago. He's probably more of a nickel back, thicker body at corner. He's played some boundary as well, but he's going to be more of a nickel, I think, long term. But Jones is interesting because he's played a ton of football at the FCS level, and he's graded out really well according to Pro Football Focus. And I'm looking at his stats now. So spent the last 2 years as a starting corner for Campbell, logged more than 500 snaps defensively in 2022, 383 more in 2021, earned a Pro Football Focus grade of near 70 both years, which for those unfamiliar is well above average grade. So I expect him to play, and honestly, he's probably your most experienced corner
Yeah.
in terms of snaps at this point. But I guess it's just for me, Siobhan, Jonathan, IBM for sure. Like I feel pretty good about that trio, and we'll see how it all plays out, Maceo. But I kind of look at those five. You got some other guys in the mix with Rance, potentially playing as well. Like I feel like the talent is there. It's just how all this is going to play out is the one question mark at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember Jonathan kind of last year going over the scouting report, and they had two pretty good corners over there and a good defensive line. And we beat them, but you can definitely see those guys have a lot of experience and have played a lot of ball. So I think definitely those three are probably the top guys right now. And I think it's just up to the coaches who you want to go with that experience over the youth and kind of a different way to play the ball.
So the other freshman corners, we'll mention them. There's a couple of walk-ons as well, but also scholarship-wise, they added Rico Watkins and Dalen Diston. Jules Montanar actually brought those guys in after being added to the staff in the spring as late signees. So those guys maybe looking at red shirt, maybe special teams role, depending on what happens there. But those are a couple of other guys. He also picked up a talented walk-on from Green Central High School, Jonathan Willis. We got a question from Chance Scott from John Willis. Is he going to get any punt return opportunities? Dude has blazing speed. He is fast. He ran multiple sub 11-second 100-meter dashes. When I'm out of practice, I haven't seen him working too much with the return team yet. Typically freshmen, it's hard for them to crack that group, but it is a possibility in time. I think this will be more of a developmental year for Jonathan, at least early on. We'll see what happens, but I like his long-term upside for sure. So let's transition now to the safety position, Maceo, and we do have some guys here who have played some football. We'll start with Julius Wood, who I think pound for pound may be one of the most talented players on the team. Just your thoughts on Julius and how much of a breakout year he enjoyed last year.
Yeah, Julius is one of those guys who flies around. I think this year he's a preseason second team all conference for the American. So, he's definitely getting some recognition and some coverage, around the conference, and guys really know who he is. But what strikes out to me from Julius is that he kind of came out of nowhere. A couple years ago, we were playing at Houston. We had like 4 delays there, and that was the first game I really noticed him out there, and they gave him some chances. Coach Weaver put him out there and kind of developed him and let him go out there and make some plays. But ever since then, he's been on the field making huge plays for us, really big hits. And I kind of wish I could do what he does, just flying around hitting guys like he does. But it's not my forte. But Julius is one of those guys who's a leader now. A guy who's been around the program for a few years, and I think he's definitely going to help developing some of the other guys in the room, him and Tegan.
Yeah, you want to talk about just like development of a program. Like to me, he kind of fits that mold. Came in as a junior college recruit, really was not highly recruited. Maceo, I think he had like 1 or 2 offers, kind of committed. Trip Weaver did an excellent job identifying him. His first year, like you mentioned, he kind of, developed, didn't play a ton till the end of the year, then grew into a bigger role last year. So it's just always fun to see those guys develop like that. And some schools come calling. I think an SEC school or two tried to get him into the portal. He ended up staying at ECU for his senior year. So really excited about what Julius brings to the table. He kind of slots in as that field safety. And then on the other side of boundary, you got another guy who's played a ton of football, Tegan Wilk. He's been banged up at times with injuries in the past. I know he played through a knee injury a lot of last year. Still gutted it out, still made some key plays. And, Tegan just always been a fun guy to watch, especially when he's healthy, Maceo. He's as good as anybody in the defensive backfield.
Yeah, definitely those two, Tegan Wilk and Julius Wood. Those are some guys who, playing at the slot in practice, you're definitely keeping an eye on them. If they're coming to fit the run and everything, if you got to block those guys, you better buckle your chin strap for sure. But I definitely like both those guys. I think those guys bring a lot of fire and intensity to the defense.
Yeah, Mike Houston is a safeties coaching background, and obviously Tripp as well. So I feel like they want safeties, Maceo, that bring that intensity, that kind of have that natural leadership. And if there's anything I know about Mike Houston, he likes a safety that's going to come downhill and hit you in the mouth. Yeah. I feel like both these guys will do that. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I definitely think too, on the other hand, that those guys are some run fitters. And we had Jira Wilson playing back there last year who kind of could do a little bit of everything, who was kind of getting the place, had a lot of pass deflections last year. So I think, this year they'll have to do a little bit more of that. But definitely those guys will come down and hit you right in the face.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And behind them, you've got a lot of competition right now. You got some new guys that have joined the program. You also got some guys that have really been developing at East Carolina. Devin King is a guy that I'm really looking forward to watching this year. Came in as a transfer walk on from Marshall, got a scholarship, I think, prior to last year's bowl game. And really, since the spring and really since last preseason, I thought Devin King has made some huge strides, and he's kind of backing up Wilk, pushing him for a starting job. Are you expecting a bigger role for Devin this year?
Yeah, definitely. And if you watch Devin closely the last few years, you just seen him grow every season. And last year specifically, I mean, he was making a ton of plays on special teams. And that's why you see him up there for preseason special teams, all conference as well. And he's not a returner or a kicker or anything like that. So he's out there making a lot of tackles, and doing his job every play. So I definitely see Devin making a push forward. And I think we do sub a little bit or a lot at safety as well in DB. So you definitely see him out there.
Another former walk on who I'm expecting to play some this year is Ty Moss
Yeah.
out of Whiteville. And, I don't think has been put on scholarship yet. Could get one in the near future, but he's been in the program, 3-4 years now, and seems to be a guy ready for that next step too. And, pretty fast. He was a high school quarterback, athletic. He's kind of made that transition to DB over the past few years. So are you expecting Ty to play some this year too?
Yeah, I think so too. For Ty, especially, I think, you know, everyone kind of moves up. First, it was Julius getting that time. I think this year is probably Devin kind of growing into that role. And I think Ty is going to have to make a lot of plays on special teams this year and get that chance at safety as well. You never know what can happen on defense. Those guys are very physical, always hitting, always around the ball. So you definitely need guys who can step up when their name is called. And I think Ty's one of those guys who've been around for a while and kind of been waiting his turn patiently. And I think it's about that time for him to get that chance.
Some more safeties, two big transfers this offseason. We talked about Tymier Brown at corner, who I expect to play a role. Dontavius Nash, who went into the same recruiting class at North Carolina with Tymier. He transferred over to ECU as well. He is in the safety room, kind of profiles more as the field safety, not the biggest guy in the world, but can really run, and he's pretty long. So they really like his coverage ability. He's looked good in practice from what I've seen, especially against the pass, which we talked about, and we'll get into that. That needs to be an area they address. And then Omar Rogers from Elon. He was an all-CAA safety. He is dealing with a little bit of a knee. He's out there in a knee brace from his last game at Elon. But during his time with the Phoenix, Maceo, this is a guy that graded out really top-notch. I think he had like 5 picks or 6 picks over the past couple of years. Really physical. So again, you look at it, we've named 6 safeties. We haven't even talked about Jordan Huff yet, who can also play safety. So I feel like there's some good depth here, especially with those transfers coming in.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, one of those concerns this year was for the DBs as well as kind of some of the skill players and O-line on the offense, just because you lost so many guys. But like you said, there's 6 or 7 guys you just named there who can play, and 2 or 3 of them who've gotten a lot of experience. So I mean, I think those guys will be fine. And I think Tegan and Juju, being older guys now, can definitely show the boys the ropes.
All right, Jordan and Huff. When I was out at practice watching the safeties a couple of days ago, they were going through their little positional drills, and they all looked fast. But Jordan Huff looked like a different type of fast. Like he was moving, he was explosive. He's coming off a major injury. But he was a big recruit out of high school, former Georgia Tech transfer. Probably was going to play last year. It sounds like he'll probably slot in at nickel or somewhere in the safety room this year. Any thoughts on him? I don't know if you got to see him practice at all last year before he got injured.
Yeah, he got hurt kind of like on the one play before I did in 101s. And even that play he made, and I think he broke up the play. It was just an athletic play of him jumping up and kind of landing awkwardly. But you could definitely see the flashes then in just those few periods of a third practice during spring ball. So I definitely think Jordan is that very versatile and can play those 2 safety and nickel positions.
So a ton of guys here, man, and we haven't even gotten into some of the other guys like Melvin Jacobs, Josh Benton are 2 walk-ons with some potential. Kamari McKinley, Javian Clark are 2 freshman safeties who are pretty highly recruited. So, I mean, you do need a lot of DBs for to play the four positions, but also for special teams, Maceo. I mean, you
Yeah.
know as well as anybody, you got to have good depth at receiver, safety, linebacker for special teams. And I feel like going through this preview, I feel like this team has that. And I guess the big key is how it all comes together. And the other thing is clearly health. I think that guys like Huff, Teagan, even Julius Wood, who's has been healthy in the past, but you got to keep your key guys healthy, and then the guys who have struggled with injuries in the past, they have to stay healthy too. So, just your overall thoughts on this group as we kind of look at it today.
Yeah, I think Coach Weaver has done a really good job of kind of developing the group just over the years, just looking back at the Gerard Stringers, Jara Wilsons, even the Jawan Powells, and some of those guys in the safety room. And I think every year is kind of a question, maybe who's the next person to step up, and you already have that one. So I expect nothing less this year, probably from Ty Moss, Devin King, and some of those other guys, transfers, Omar, getting some opportunities in the room. But it's definitely a good thing to have a lot of guys who you can play. And like you said, special teams is a huge part and something that we can improve on every year. And you definitely need some guys who can run down there and make some hits, because that's kind of how you make a name for yourself as well.
So, if there's one thing that I feel good about with the DBs, it's stopping the run, especially with the safeties. And I feel like this team is going to be good stopping the run. Maceo once again, maybe not as dominant as last year because they have made some personnel changes. I think to get better against the pass.
Mm-hmm.
Like I look at some of the linebackers we talked about last week, and even some of these safeties. Like I think if you go with Dontavius Nash or some of these smaller DBs, maybe you take a hit in the run game, but you're better against the pass. So I don't know, like last year, ECU ranked 131st out of 133 teams in passing yards allowed. Like that is not, realistically good enough. They got to get better there. And so, what do you think that balance is like from the coaching staff's perspective? Of hey, we love these safeties that are physical, can come down and hit, but we got to be better in coverage. And pass rush goes into that. That is just as important as pass coverage. But there has to be a balance here for sure.
Yeah, I think you definitely, the coaches this year definitely have that confidence in the D line that they'll really help stopping the run, and kind of just that physical, the personnel changes from last year, going from more bigger dudes to kind of more slimmer, longer, faster guys this year. I think that's definitely built to stop the pass for sure. And I think, the coaches just put them in the right position and just understand kind of the team we're playing from week to week and what they like to do. I think they'll be perfectly fine. And I don't think we'll place 131st this year. Definitely not. I hope to see some improvements at least. But I think the D line, it starts up front, and they'll definitely help the back end and get to the quarterback and help them maybe not just be sitting back there covering for 5 days. So
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You're only as good as your pass rush or your
yeah,
pass coverage. I mean, both of them got to be good. If one of them is bad, it exposes the other one. So
yeah,
you got to be solid in both. I do feel like they've made the right personnel adjustments there. Now it's just a matter of how it all comes together. The one thing I will caution fans with is like don't get discouraged if they give up some big plays in the first couple games, because you're not going out there facing chopped liver week
yeah.
1, week 2. We just saw the coaches poll come out today. Michigan's ranked second nationally, so that's going to be it's going to be quite the challenge. But great opportunity, and so we'll see what happens there. But if they give up some big plays early, I think it's going to take time for this group to gel. That's just
Yeah.
part of it when you bring in so many new faces. Somebody did ask, Chuck asked, who will be the starters for the 4 defensive backs. I'll go through my list, and you can throw out any different ideas if you got them, Maceo. So I think Julius and Teagan will likely start at safety. Again, this is
For
all
sure.
assuming if everybody's healthy.
For sure.
And then, I've just heard so much talk about Siobhan Revel. Like, I feel like he's got to start. And I think they're going to go with IBM at the other corner at this point. Again, long way between now and September 2nd. 26 days, by the way, which is IBM's number. So I'm going with IBM for field corner. But I do think there's a lot of competition there. Like, wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Jones, Tymier Brown, even Antoine Jackson end up starting at corner before the season's over. Just any differing thoughts there?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the safeties. Juju and Teagan will definitely start if they're both healthy when the season comes. And I definitely say Siobhan maybe end up playing the field, and then you put Jonathan at the boundary corner. I just like his experience. I definitely see IBM. He's going to get to play for sure. IBM will get a lot of time this year and a lot of snaps, but I just think you have to go with that experience just off the bat. You want to get a good start, have a good feeling for the season, and kind of make sure everyone's on a big mindset. And you don't want to have a huge bust, on one of the first plays in the first few games, because you're playing some really good teams. Like you said, Michigan's ranked second in the country by the coaches poll, at least. And then you're going to play Marshall and App State, who aren't any slouches. We got killed by App State a few years ago, so they're a good team as well. So I think you just have to go with that experience.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But hey, I think as much overall talent and depth in this room as they've had in years. So looking
Yeah.
forward to seeing how it all comes together. Steve Shocker, which I don't believe is a real name, he wants to know, when is the special teams podcast? There's not a special teams podcast, Steve, but what I can tell you, if you got a special teams question, throw it at me now. I'll answer it. And here's what you need to know. Special teams, punt returner, you got a couple guys working there. You got Josh Murphy, Brock Spalding, you got Javius Bond, and Josiah Hatfield. Kick return, Josiah Hatfield, who took one back last
You're
year.
welcome.
Yep, Maceo with the
You're
block
welcome.
to spring him. I'm trying to think who else is back there at kick return. I don't know if Josh Murphy's working kick
Nah,
return.
you might see Jari Patterson back there,
That's
maybe doing
right.
some kick return.
Yeah, he did, and he's done some work at punt return in the past, but he could do some kick return. He was actually getting some reps at outside receiver today because he's been doing so good. They're moving him around, trying to get him on the field. He's having a good preseason.
Kerry King maybe can make an appearance back there, returning the ball as well.
Yeah, carries fast. So those are kind of your return guys. Punting, Luke Larson is competing with Archer Trafford, who's the transfer from Mississippi State. That's a pretty neck and neck competition. We'll see who wins that. Kicking wise, so I was told today, basically they got 4 kickers that they feel good about.
Yeah.
And, they brought in Jerry Rice from VMI. He's in the mix. He's an all-conference kicker. Not the Jerry Rice, but a different Jerry Rice. And then Carson Smith is healthy. He's had an awesome preseason. As of today, I don't want to jinx him. Let me knock on wood. He had not missed a kick in a live competition. So he's a guy who's competing. Of course, Andrew Conrad is back. And then Lath Margin has also had a really good preseason. So all 4 of those guys are in the mix. I would expect Lath to handle kickoffs with his big leg. And snapping, I'm not as sure about at this point. I have not seen a lot of snapping. And then Larson and Trafford are doing the holding as well.
We need Slade back.
Slade Roy, yeah, he's going to be like the long snapper of the year. I keep seeing him listed on all these lists. How much is Slade Roy getting paid in NIL money from LSU right now?
No idea. Question. Pretty good though, probably.
Whatever works, I guess. So there's your special teams preview, Steve Shocker. If you got any follow-up questions, let me know. I would expect to see some new schemes this year. I'm not going to reveal what they are in case Michigan's listening. But I think you'll see some changes there. And then Chance Scott has a question. He says, I know this is a DB preview. How do y'all feel about the potential Pac-12 AAC merger? So I don't know if you got any thoughts on this, Maceo. We can address it real quickly. But I heard
an AAC.
Yeah. So what I heard last night. So Mike Oresco is the commissioner of the American.
Yes.
He's basically trying to get the Pac-4 remaining schools, which is Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State. They have nowhere to go. So he's trying to get them to join the American in football only. And ESPN, of course, has the TV contract for the American. Right now, ESPN does not have a single West Coast presence because I think Fox and CBS have the Mountain West and also the new teams, Big 12, right? Big 10, yep. So basically, ESPN doesn't have any West Coast content. So like those 10 p.m. games, like Stanford, Oregon State, like that's not going to be a thing anymore. So what Oresco is trying to tell ESPN is, hey, give us more money basically to lure these Pac-4 schools into the American, and that can be your West Coast window. So that is trying to be accomplished. How realistic that is, I don't know. And if this happened, that would move the American to like 18 teams. So it's not like ECU would be playing Stanford. You'd probably go to the divisions, 9 in each, East and West. And maybe you could get like a conference championship game, ECU versus Stanford, but we're not going to be seeing ECU travel to Oregon State anytime soon either
Yeah.
way. So I don't know. I mean, conference football, from my vantage point, Maceo is getting pretty stupid between like all these conferences, like just shelling out the money and leaving rivalries behind. I still love the games. Like that's what I love telling the stories and I love covering the games and watching the games. I don't know how you feel as a former player. Like, do y'all pay attention to any of this stuff, or what's the talk in the locker room? Y'all hear to see this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of learned my lesson from, waiting on the NCAA game to come out in 2023 and hoping we'd be on the game. So you can't kind of really focus on what's to come. You just kind of focus on the present. But at the same time, for the biggest thing for me is financially, how would that work out if we're trying to fly to the West Coast every other week? Um, and that's not just us. You have other schools that are on the East, but we're probably the farthest East team in the American. But just how would that work out? And at the same time, I don't I don't know how the other guys would feel about coming all the way to Greenville, North Carolina to try to play. But you never know. It's 2023, so you never know what's going to happen. About to be 2024 in 6, 7 months. So we'll see. And I think it might be exciting. You see some of these other teams moving on to different conferences, and you hear about the Florida States and Clemson maybe thinking about going to the AAC. And so you never know. So my bid is hopefully we eventually get into ACC. That's my bid.
I think if the ACC falls apart, specifically if like Carolina goes to the Big Ten or whatever, or if one of the UNC or NC State or both move on, I think the ACC has to take ECU at that point. Wake and Duke are only moving the needle so much in football in the state of North Carolina, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see, man. I try to stay away from it unless it directly involves ECU as far as conference expansion talk. And we're getting to the point where now that I'm actually hearing the Pac-4, which is crazy as it sounds, the fact that Stanford and East Carolina could conceivably be in the same conference. I will talk about it, but I don't like conference expansion. I know that it's out there. It's the elephant in the room. But I like talking about the games, the players. I know some people love conference expansion. So we'll continue to cover it as it pertains to ECU. But that's about all today.
Yeah. And another thing about that is just, do you want to bring those teams in to, maybe dominate our conference that we've been in for the past, several years? I mean, because, just recruiting wise, we're not getting the same recruits as a Stanford or Washington or whoever else is still there. We're not getting those same recruits as an ECU or a Memphis or some schools like that. So I don't know if you guys want them to come in and take over the American, but I definitely see it could be a business opportunity. But you never know.
It's all about the money. Hey, if they bring more money to ECU into the league, I guess you follow the money. That's why Florida State or Clemson might eventually jump to the SEC or whatnot, because I guess they could get more money. It's just follow the dollar bill, I guess, is what it comes down to. Which, hey, as somebody who has made financial decisions, I understand it. But at some point, you just run out of needing more money. Maybe not. Steve Shocker says he is a real person. He says, do we see Thunder from Down Under, Luke Larson, run the football this year? So Luke Larson does have one career rushing attempt, maybe multiple. You remember that SMU game in 2020?
Yeah, it was probably the highlight of my season that year. But to be honest with you guys, I don't think that was a plan. I think he just did that himself. He's about 30 years old, so he can make decisions on his own. So I think that wasn't planned, and it kind of worked out and got us going. But I would say don't expect that this year.
Yeah, I think I want to say, didn't he try something similar at some point and it didn't work out, and we haven't seen it. Maybe it was just in practice. I don't know. But I feel like I've seen a scenario where he tried to pull it. It didn't go well. I'll just be happy if we get the punts off this year, Maceo, without him getting blocked.
Yeah.
So, but no, I think special teams will be improved this year. I think a lot of that will go to the competition they have by all the players they brought in to help push that competition to the next level.
Yeah.
All right, that'll do it. Unless we get any late special teams questions. Maceo, this has been a fun position preview series that we've done to get us through really the dead of the offseason. Now we're into preseason camp. We got a lot of things happening. You're going to be involved. I don't know how much you want to divulge in the coming weeks more with ECU sports coverage locally with other entities as well. But we'll be seeing you around either way, man. And hopefully we can keep getting you on the Hoist the Colors podcast as well every now and then. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoyed my time for sure this summer.
Yeah, well, we'll keep
Gave me
getting
some
you
good
on,
ball
man.
to talk about.
Yeah, maybe we'll try to get you on some reaction shows, and then you'll really see what it's like to be answering questions under fires.
Yeah.
You can comment on the play calling, the decision making, and really make a lot of friends. So.
Yeah, for sure.
All
Frenemies.
right. Exactly. That is Maceo Donald. I'm Stephen Igo. We'll be back. I think we're shooting for Wednesday for a basketball podcast, but we'll keep you updated there. By the way, 60% off special on hoistthecolors.net for your preseason camp coverage ends tonight at midnight. If you're not a subscriber yet, give us a try tonight by midnight. 60% for the next year. You get 60% off. So check that out, hoistthecolors.net. All right, this has been fun. We'll talk to you guys again next time. This has been the Hoist the Colors podcast.